AMC's The Walking Dead wasn't just a zombie show, it was a cultural phenomenon. For years, it had us glued to our screens, biting our nails as ragtag survivors braved the apocalypse. And one of the characters we held closest, Glenn Rhee. Played by Stephen Yeun, Glenn was the heart of the group, clever, kind, and always willing to risk his life for others. From the moment he saved Rick Grimes in Atlanta in Season 1, fans rooted for him like he was family. He wasn't a brooding anti-hero or a muscle-bound warrior. He was an everyday guy who grew into a total badass. Whether it was slipping through hordes of walkers or falling in love with Maggie, Glenn became the show's moral compass. His relationship with Maggie was a rare beam of hope in the show's bleak world. So, yeah, when the Season 7 premiere hit, viewers were not prepared. The series had been teasing the arrival of its most sadistic villain yet, Negan. Played with devilish charm by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Negan came wrapped in menace, sarcasm, and a barbed wire baseball bat named Lucille. And when Season 6 ended with him raising that bat and smashing someone's skull, cut to black, we spent months agonizing over who got the fatal blow. Then came the infamous Season 7 premiere. We watched, horrified, as Negan chose Abraham first. Brutal, yes. Devastating, absolutely. But then, just when we thought the carnage was over, Daryl lashed out in anger. And that was the tipping point. Negan turned, grinned, and drove Lucille into Glenn's skull. What followed was one of the most graphic and disturbing scenes in TV history. Blood sprayed. Glenn's eye bulged. He tried to speak, gurgling, "Maggie, I'll find you," before the final, sickening blows. Fans were stunned. This wasn't just a death, it was a massacre. And it wasn't just one of our favorites dying. It was watching someone we knew, someone we'd grown with, be destroyed in the most dehumanizing way. The backlash was instant. Social media exploded. Viewers were heartbroken, furious. Some even turned off the show entirely. Ratings for the second episode dropped sharply. Many accused the show of going too far, crossing the line between gritty realism and trauma porn. Glenn's death didn't just hurt, it shattered people. So, why did they do it? According to The Walking Dead creator Robert Kirkman, Glenn's fate was sealed long before the cameras rolled. In the comic book, issue 100, Glenn dies at the hands of Negan in the same horrific way. Kirkman said there was just too much emotional fallout tied to that moment. Rick's rage, Maggie's journey, Negan's introduction. It all hinged on that death. "Pulling the thread on this sweater just pulls too many things apart," he admitted. Still, this one hit differently for Kirkman. Glenn's was the first major comic death written after the character had been cast for TV. "It makes things a little weird and more difficult," he confessed. "But I do find myself very hesitant to do character deaths on the show these days. You miss these people." And we did. Fans mourned Glenn like he was real. His kindness, his bravery, his goofy smile, it all made him unforgettable. Losing him wasn't just a plot twist, it was a heartbreak. And honestly, we still haven't recovered. In 2011, Britain lost one of its most recognizable television personalities. Jimmy Savile, the eccentric entertainer, the tireless philanthropist, the man who had raised millions for charity, was gone at the age of 84. His funeral was a spectacle, a nation mourning a man who had spent decades bringing joy to audiences and helping the sick and vulnerable. He was knighted, celebrated, a fixture of British culture. But behind the glowing tributes, behind the headlines of admiration, an unsettling question lingered, because for years there had been whispers, hushed conversations, unspoken doubts, rumors that never seemed to gain traction. And then, after his death, something cracked. The whispers grew louder. The rumors became confessions. Investigators began pulling at a thread, and what they uncovered sent shockwaves through the entire country. Jimmy Savile, the beloved television host, had spent decades hiding in plain sight. Under the guise of charity work and entertainment, he had preyed upon the young, the vulnerable, the sick. His crimes weren't just disturbing, they were almost unthinkable. By the time the truth fully emerged, the numbers were staggering. Over 500 victims. For years, Savile had been best known for Jim'll Fix It, a family-friendly show where he granted children's wishes. Millions saw him as the quirky, oddball presenter with his signature tracksuits and oversized jewelry. But away from the cameras, away from the bright studio lights, he was something else entirely. He had built his entire career on trust. Trust that he twisted and exploited with chilling precision. He had positioned himself where few would question him. In the 1960s, he began volunteering at Leeds General Infirmary, a children's hospital. He wasn't just a visitor, he became a fixture. He raised money, took a part-time job as a porter, gained unrestricted access to patients, and no one suspected a thing, or at least, no one spoke up. One victim, a 14-year-old boy in a wheelchair, recalled how Savile casually approached him, made a joke, then crossed a line that shattered the boy's trust forever. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, a chilling, calculated pattern that repeated itself over and over. Savile's career flourished. He became the host of Top of the Pops, Britain's biggest music show, where young female dancers performed weekly. The energy was electric, the music was loud, but behind the scenes, something sinister was happening. In 1976, during a live broadcast, a teenage girl named Sylvia Edwards felt a sudden, unwelcome touch. She turned, horrified, and saw Savile grinning. She tried to report it. No one listened. Why? How had he gotten away with it for so long? The answer was as disturbing as the crimes themselves. Jimmy Savile wasn't just a celebrity. He was a protected figure. He had powerful friends. He had connections within the BBC, within the police, even within the royal family. He wasn't just a television host. He was an advisor to Prince Charles, a man who had influence over public policies, who had the ear of people at the highest levels of society. For decades, people suspected. Staff at hospitals whispered about his behavior. BBC employees exchanged knowing looks, but Savile was untouchable. He was Sir Jimmy Savile. He was the man who raised millions for sick children. Who would dare accuse him? It wasn't until after his death that the full horror of his crimes was revealed. As police investigated, survivors who had once been silenced began to speak out, and the more they spoke, the more the scale of his abuse became undeniable. This wasn't just about children. Savile's victims spanned generations, from 5-year-old children to 75-year-old hospital patients. Women, men, the young, the elderly. No one had been safe. He had used charity work as his shield, his fame as his weapon, and the most chilling part, he had never even tried to hide. In 2013, an official report confirmed what many had feared. At least 60 victims at Leeds General Infirmary alone, hundreds more across the country, a legacy of devastation, concealed for decades by a culture of silence and willful ignorance. Even after death, Savile's crimes forced the nation to reckon with an uncomfortable truth. He had been allowed to operate unchecked, because no one wanted to believe he could be guilty. Victims had spoken, but they had been dismissed. Allegations had surfaced, but they had been buried. The fallout was immense. Investigations uncovered not just his crimes, but the complicity of institutions that had enabled him. The BBC, the hospitals, the authorities who had failed to act, the people who had looked away. For the survivors, justice came too late. Savile was gone. He would never stand trial, he would never answer for his crimes, but his exposure shattered the illusion that powerful figures were beyond scrutiny, and it forced Britain to confront a bitter, haunting question. How many others waiting for the world to look away? If you've ever cried over a fictional dad who wasn't technically your dad, you're not alone. HBO's The Last of Us became a cultural juggernaut for good reason. Heart-pounding action, devastating emotional stakes, and, at its center, a gruff yet lovable survivor named Joel Miller, played by internet daddy Pedro Pascal. Viewers instantly latched onto his protectiveness over Ellie, the witty, whip-smart teen he basically adopts after the world falls apart. Season 1 left fans breathless. Joel rescued Ellie from a shady hospital operation where doctors planned to kill her for a cure by any means necessary. In the process, he shot his way out and killed the head surgeon. Morally gray, definitely. But Joel had his reasons, and we still loved him for it. So when Season 2 hit screens, no non-gamers was ready for what came next. Because what came next was Joel's shocking, savage, and totally heartbreaking death. It all starts off pretty innocently. Joel and his brother Tommy are out on patrol when they save a young woman named Abby from a swarm of infected. Classic Joel move. Heroic, maybe even fatherly. Friends are holed up nearby in a ski lodge, so Joel and Tommy follow her. Big mistake. What they don't know is Abby isn't some helpless stranger. She's the daughter of that same surgeon Joel shot back in the hospital, and she's been hunting him for years. The moment they enter that lodge, Joel's fate is sealed. Abby shoots him in the leg, brutal but not fatal. Yet, she stares him down with cold fury. This isn't just revenge, it's deeply personal, and she's not letting him off easy. Joel doesn't beg. In fact, he almost seems to understand. It's like he knows he's about to pay for everything. And then it happens. The golf club. Yeah, you heard right, a golf club. Abby starts beating Joel with it. It's messy, it's violent, and it's mostly off camera. But that doesn't make it easier to watch. Ellie arrives mid-bludgeoning, screaming in horror as her protector, her dad, is murdered in front of her. The final blow comes not from the club, but from its broken handle, driven into Joel's neck. Quiet, brutal, final. And just like that, Joel Miller is gone. The reaction? Nuclear. Fans were furious. Some gamers were already prepared since the death was pulled nearly frame for frame from The Last of Us Part 2 video game. But the non-gamers? Pure shock. Twitter exploded. Memes flew. Some viewers even swore off the show altogether. Others, though, praised the scene's rawness and bold storytelling. Either way, nobody was okay. Executive producer Craig Mazin defended the decision. "We don't do these things to hurt people," he said. "We're with Ellie. She's experiencing grief and heartbreak, and that's what this story is about." And it's true. The Last of Us isn't just about surviving zombies, it's about surviving loss. Joel's death wasn't random. It was, as Mazin put it, preordained. Even Pedro Pascal knew from day one that Joel wouldn't make it past Season 2. "When I talked to Pedro the first time," Mazin said, "I told him, this will happen. This story doesn't go on for 7 seasons with you in that spot." So yes, Joel had to die, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. We laughed with him, we cried with him, we watched him go from grumpy loner to fierce protector. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but he was ours. And losing him felt like losing a friend. Rest in peace, Joel. You deserved more than a golf club. March 6, 1995, started like any other day in Lake Orion, Michigan. No one could have predicted that within 72 hours, a shocking on-air moment would spiral into cold-blooded murder. Scott Amador, a 32-year-old bartender known for his big heart and infectious energy, appeared on The Jenny Jones Show, a daytime talk show infamous for its jaw-dropping surprises. That day's segment, Secret Crush, the idea was simple. Bring people on, let them confess their hidden romantic feelings and watch the drama unfold. But what happened next was anything but simple. Scott's secret crush was Jonathan Schmitz, a 24-year-old man he had known for years. Jonathan, completely unaware that he was about to be the center of attention, walked onto the stage with no idea what was coming. When Scott's feelings were revealed, Jonathan laughed it off, visibly uncomfortable, making it clear he was straight. The audience cheered, the cameras rolled, and the moment seemed to pass without incident. But behind the awkward smiles and nervous laughter, something dark was brewing. 3 days later, Scott Amador was dead. It started with a simple note, one that Scott playfully left in Jonathan's mailbox. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a way to keep the conversation going. But whatever Scott's intention, the reaction was something no one saw coming. Humiliated, furious, and unable to shake the weight of that moment on national television, Jonathan withdrew money from his bank, drove to a store, and bought a shotgun. His mind was made up. What happened next was pure horror. Jonathan drove straight to Scott's mobile home, knocked on the door, and asked one chilling question. "Did you leave me that note?" Scott smiled and said yes. Without hesitation, Jonathan turned, retrieved his gun from the car, and came back. Before Scott could react, before he could plead or even process the danger, Jonathan raised the shotgun and fired, twice. The bullets tore through Scott's chest. Within moments, he was gone. Jonathan didn't run. He didn't hide. Instead, he drove to a nearby gas station, called 911, and calmly admitted to everything. His reason? Humiliation. The case exploded in the media, quickly earning the name the Jenny Jones murder. People demanded answers. Had Jonathan been manipulated by the show's producers? He insisted he had been led to believe his admirer would be a woman. The show's team denied it. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a murder. This was a tragic consequence of reality television pushing the boundaries of entertainment. Jonathan was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His defense argued that he acted under extreme emotional distress, pointing to past mental health struggles. But was this an impulsive crime or a calculated execution? In 1996, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison. The twists didn't stop there. His conviction was overturned on appeal. Then, in a 1999 retrial, he was found guilty again and sent back to prison. But even that wasn't the end. In 2017, after serving 22 years, Jonathan was released on parole. The decision reignited the pain for Scott's family, who believed Jonathan had never truly shown remorse. Their attorney, Jeffrey Feger, called it an insult to justice. But there was one more battle left to fight. Scott's family sued the Jenny Jones Show and its parent company, Warner Brothers, accusing them of reckless exploitation. They won $9.3 million in damages. But just like before, justice slipped through their fingers. The ruling was overturned, with courts deciding that the show couldn't have foreseen the tragedy that followed. To this day, the case stands as a chilling reminder of how reality TV, built on shock and spectacle, can have deadly consequences. Shows like The Jenny Jones Show thrived on embarrassment and surprise, never stopping to consider what would happen when the cameras stopped rolling. Could Scott Amador still be alive if Jonathan had been given more information? If the producers had handled things differently, would this tragedy have been avoided? No one can say for sure, but one thing is clear. For Scott, what started as a moment of laughter turned into a death sentence. And for the world, the Jenny Jones murder exposed the terrifying truth about turning real emotions into entertainment. Sometimes the cost is irreversible. If you've ever watched Better Call Saul, you know it's more than just a prequel. It's a slow-burn masterpiece of morality, identity, and, well, chaos. The show follows Jimmy McGill, a scrappy lawyer with a good heart and questionable ethics, as he spirals into becoming Saul Goodman, the slick criminal attorney we met in Breaking Bad. And while the show gave us drug cartels, scams, and courtroom drama, no one expected one of its most jaw-dropping deaths to come not from the cartel, but from a man in a tailored suit with a Bluetooth headset, Howard Hamlin. Now, Howard wasn't exactly fan-favorite material from the start. He was the guy who looked like he ran a yoga studio in the Hamptons and had probably never jaywalked in his life. Still, over time, viewers grew to understand him. not as a villain, but as a man doing his best within a broken system. While Jimmy and Kim, the show's ride-or-die couple, slid deeper into morally gray schemes, Howard stayed polished, professional, and maybe a little smug, but basically decent. Season 6 set Howard up as the mark for Jimmy and Kim's most elaborate scam yet. The plan: ruin Howard's reputation so a multi-million-dollar class-action lawsuit would settle early, giving them a massive payday. Fake drug use, doctored photos, and double-crossing detectives. The whole con was deliciously cruel, and somehow Howard took the hits with grace until he didn't. In the mid-season finale titled Plan and Execution, Howard storms into Jimmy and Kim's apartment, furious. He finally connects the dots and calls them out. "You're soulless," he says, a haunting accusation that felt like a mirror to the audience too. It's peak drama. The music stills, the lighting tightens. It feels like a confrontation 7 seasons in the making. And then, everything shatters. Without warning, Lalo Salamanca, a literal cartel psychopath who's been crawling through sewers and plotting a massacre, steps out of the shadows like a horror movie villain. Howard, completely unaware of Lalo or his world, looks confused. "Who's this guy?" he asks. Bang. Just like that, Howard Hamlin's brains hit the wall. It's not just shocking, it's disturbing. Lalo, with zero emotion, shoots Howard in the head like swatting a fly. No build-up, no threats. 1 second Howard is mid-sentence, the next he's lifeless on the floor, eyes still open. The camera lingers just long enough for the horror to settle in. It's the moment Jimmy's 2 worlds, the legal and the lethal, violently collide. Fans were stunned. Reddit exploded. Memes of Howard as a fallen angel in a suit trended. People who once joked about Howard's perfect hair suddenly mourned him like a fallen brother. Some even rewatched early seasons just to appreciate him more. Many agreed Howard didn't deserve this. He wasn't a saint, but he was certainly not cartel execution material. Actor Patrick Fabian, who played Howard, said he knew the end was coming before filming, but reading the script still shocked him. "It felt like graduating high school," he said. "But if you're gonna get shot, getting shot by Tony Dalton with all that charisma, not a bad way to go." Director Tom Schnauz explained the death had to happen. It was the cost of Jimmy and Kim's descent, proof that their cons have deadly consequences. And for Howard, who had spent years cleaning up after other people's messes, his death was the ultimate injustice. A man who lived by the rules, taken out by people who didn't even know his name. Howard's final scene became iconic not for violence, but for tragedy. A man who never got the credit he deserved, dying in a room full of people who had already written him off. And that, more than the gunshot, is what made fans grieve. He wasn't perfect, but man, he didn't deserve to go out like that. June 14th, 2008. Miyazaki, Japan. A live television broadcast was in full swing, the air electric with laughter and excitement. Jaga Jaga Tengoku, a beloved show known for celebrating local traditions with a playful twist, had something special planned for the day. The cameras zoomed in on a muddy rice field where butt sumo, a chaotic, comedic competition, was about to unfold. The goal was not to win, but to get as covered in mud as possible. Yanagita Tetsushi, a charismatic television announcer, was there to cover the event. Ever the entertainer, he wasn't content to simply report. He wanted to be part of the fun. Without hesitation, he made a decision that would change his life forever. He dove forward, head first into the muddy water, aiming to fully submerge himself for the audience's amusement. The crowd cheered, expecting another moment of light-hearted television gold. But the laughter died almost instantly. Beneath the murky surface, the soft mud he expected wasn't there. Instead, the ground was solid, unyielding, waiting. His body struck it with a sickening crack. A violent jolt shot through his spine. In an instant, everything stopped. No movement, no sound. The cameras kept rolling. The crowd kept cheering. No one realized, not yet, that something had gone horribly wrong. Even his co-host, unaware of the disaster unfolding before him, approached laughing and poured more mud onto Yanagita's head. But he didn't react, he didn't laugh, he couldn't. The weight of the moment settled in. Something was very wrong. Crew members rushed over, shaking him, calling his name. But shaking a man with a possible spinal injury? A mistake that could have made things even worse. The cheers turned to gasps, then to silence. The show was no longer entertainment. It had become a nightmare. Paramedics arrived in a blur of sirens and urgency, rushing Yanagita to a hospital in Kumamoto. Every second felt like an eternity. When the doctors spoke, their words shattered the world around them. Severe cervical spine injury, a 99% chance of permanent paralysis. Just like that, the vibrant, energetic announcer, a man who had spent his life bringing joy to others, was told he might never move again. But even in that moment, his thoughts weren't for himself. His first words after regaining consciousness weren't about his own condition. "Please," he whispered, "take care of my mother." A son's love, still stronger than his pain. For most, the story would have ended there, a tragedy, a cautionary tale. But Yanagita refused to let his fate be written for him. The battle that followed was unlike anything he had ever faced. His body, once so full of energy, now fought against him at every turn. Even sitting up became a struggle. His blood pressure would plummet, causing him to faint. The simplest movements seemed impossible, but he fought on. 1 year after the accident, he lifted his arm, just a few centimeters. To most, it would have seemed like nothing. To him, it was everything. It was hope. It was proof that he wasn't done. 10 months after the accident, he returned home in a wheelchair. But home wasn't the end of his journey. It was just another battleground. He pushed through grueling therapy, retraining his body to perform basic tasks most people take for granted. Shaving, typing, holding a pen. Each small victory was a war won. And then, against all odds, he returned to television. 3 years after the accident, in 2011, he appeared on live TV once again. For the first time since the fall, millions saw his face, not as a tragic figure but as a man who had fought his way back. His body was different, but his spirit was unchanged, and he didn't stop there. In 2012, he became a regular on Mapos, the successor show to Jaga Jaga Tangoku. His voice was back, his presence was back, his passion was back. His story is not just one of survival, it's a story of defiance, a story of a man who refused to stay down, a story of a voice that, even when silenced, found a way to be heard again. What if he had given up? Would we have witnessed this incredible comeback? Would we have seen a broken body defy the odds, fueled by sheer will? His journey is a reminder to us all. No fall, no matter how devastating, has to be the end of the story. Let's be honest, Succession isn't the kind of show you just watch, you devour it. It's HBO at its sharpest, a twisted tale of wealth, power, and family dysfunction that feels part Greek tragedy, part billionaire soap opera. At the center of it all, Logan Roy, the brutal, brilliant, terrifying patriarch you love to hate and kind of fear. Played masterfully by Brian Cox, Logan was more than a CEO. He was a force of nature. And from episode 1, we knew something was up. He suffered a stroke right out of the gate. So sure, maybe we all saw it coming, but not like this. It happened in season 4, episode 3, an episode misleadingly titled Connor's Wedding. While the Roy siblings gathered on a yacht to celebrate their brother's cringy, awkward nuptials, Logan was up in the air, literally flying to Sweden to try to rescue a failing business deal. And then he collapsed. No big buildup, no last words, just a sudden, invisible moment that changed everything. The brilliance? We barely see Logan at all. Most of the episode unfolds in frantic, muffled phone calls between Tom, Shiv's estranged husband, stuck on the plane. He's trying to explain what's happening. They're trying to understand. Viewers are stuck in the same helpless fog. Is he dead? Is this real? No dramatic music, no fade to black, just panicked voices, shaky hands, and an overwhelming sense of what the hell is happening. there's one haunting image: the phone pressed against Logan's lifeless ear, while CPR is being performed. Shiv's voice trembles through the line, trying to reach her father, even though deep down she knows he's already gone. That shot? It's a Frankenstein composite, Logan's head filmed separately, stitched onto a stunt double's chest being compressed. Cold, clinical, devastating. And the real gut punch? There's no closure, no tearful bedside scene. No "I've always loved you" moment. Just the awful modern reality of a loved one dying while you're not there. And all you get is a choppy phone call with bad reception. Fans were stunned. Twitter exploded. Succession Nation went into collective mourning. Did that just happen? They asked. It was like killing off Tony Soprano mid-season, but more sudden. Critics called it one of TV's boldest moves, and viewers couldn't stop crying, even if they weren't sure why. After all, Logan was awful, right? But damn, we felt that loss. Director Mark Mylod revealed that Logan's death had been planned for years. The goal? To make it feel messy, inconvenient, and real. Great drama out of mundanity, as he put it. And it worked. Every camera angle was chosen to make us feel like voyeurs, trapped in the grief, unable to look away. And Brian Cox? He didn't even lie down for most of it. The guy had earned his rest. In the end, Logan Roy's death was so powerful, not because it was loud, but because it was silent, unexpected, undignified, raw, and fans were left grieving not just the character, but the end of a chaotic relationship we'd all become weirdly invested in. Love him or loathe him, Logan Roy was family, and when he died, it felt like we lost a piece of TV history. It was 2016 in Moscow, Russia. The cameras were rolling, the lights were bright. The audience of the popular television show Pro Lyubov, about love, was ready for an evening of light-hearted entertainment. They had no idea they were about to witness something they would never forget. That night, the show had planned something special. A live performance featuring a bear. Not just any bear, but Bona. A massive brown bear dressed in a red and yellow skirt with a matching hat. She looked almost comical, almost charming, almost safe. But Bona was still a wild animal. Her handler, dressed flamboyantly in a flamenco outfit, guided her onto the stage. A heavy leather muzzle covered her jaws. A thick leash kept her movements controlled. To keep her calm, the handler fed her treats through the small opening in the muzzle. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Bona twirled in circles on command. The audience clapped and laughed. The cameras zoomed in on her massive frame as she performed her tricks. And then, it happened. A young presenter, filming a segment about wild animal safety, stepped forward. Maybe she wanted to make the moment more interactive. Maybe she wanted to prove a point. Maybe she simply forgot what she was dealing with. She reached out her hand. A second of hesitation, a shift in the air, and then Bona turned, fast. With the sheer, raw power of nature itself, her massive paw swiped through the air and caught hold of the presenter's clothing. The force of it yanked the woman downward with a terrifying thud. The room went silent. The studio audience, once so full of laughter, now sat frozen in place. The cameraman, trained to capture every moment, instinctively took a step back. For a split second, the tension was unbearable. Would Bona attack? Would she strike again? Would the situation spiral into something far, far worse? And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Bona, as if losing interest, let go. Her handler reacted instantly, pulling the leash taut, yanking the bear back with force. He barked commands, reprimanding the presenter, not the bear. The young woman staggered to her feet, her face pale, her breath unsteady. No blood, no visible injuries, but the terror in her eyes told the real story. She mumbled an apology. To whom? No one could say. To the audience? To the handler? To the bear? But the real question hung heavy in the air. What if Bona hadn't stopped? The bear was led off the stage, but the unease remained. It was a chilling reminder of something that had been overlooked in the bright lights and scripted performances. A bear in a costume is still a bear. For years, animal rights organizations like PETA had warned about the dangers of using wild animals in entertainment. Bears like Bona were deprived of hibernation, kept in captivity, forced to perform under unnatural conditions. They were trained, but they were not tame. Even the most experienced handler couldn't erase the instinct that lay just beneath the surface. The moment that presenter stepped too close, the illusion shattered. In that instant, Bona was not a performer. She was a predator. The show was planned for entertainment. Instead, they got a wake-up call. That night, millions of viewers saw the terrifying truth. No amount of training, no costume, no muzzle could fully control an animal that was never meant to be on a stage. And for the young presenter whose segment was supposed to warn about the dangers of wild animals, the irony was cruel. Because now, she was the warning. Game of Thrones wasn't just a fantasy series. It was a full-blown cultural obsession. From fire-breathing dragons to political backstabbing that made DC look tame, the show had it all. But most of all, it had characters we rooted for, cried over, and sometimes shouted at through our screens. At the heart of it was Robb Stark, the young noble king in the North, who stepped up after his father, Ned Stark, was famously beheaded. We thought Robb would avenge his dad, take the throne, and restore some order to Westeros. We were so wrong. Robb had it all going for him. Charisma, strategy, a badass direwolf, and a loyal army. But if Game of Thrones taught us anything, it's that honor doesn't guarantee survival. And love? Well, that's a death sentence. Robb fell in love with Talisa, a battlefield healer. Not exactly the arranged bride promised to his ally, Walder Frey. Breaking that deal was like RSVPing to your own funeral. To patch things up, Robb offered his uncle up as a backup groom. Walder Frey accepted, on the outside, but inside, he was plotting one of the most cold-blooded betrayals in TV history. Enter The Red Wedding, the 9th episode of Season 3, chillingly titled The Reigns of Castamere. If you've seen the show, you know the 9th episode always hits like a truck. This one, it hit like a semi on fire. What started as a joyful wedding feast turned into a nightmare dipped in blood. The Freys locked the doors, cued their ominous house anthem, and all hell broke loose. Robb's pregnant wife, Talisa, was stabbed repeatedly in the stomach. Yes, you read that right. It was brutal, personal, and impossible to watch without feeling nauseous. Then came Robb, shot full of arrows like some twisted medieval pincushion. And finally, Catelyn Stark, Robb's mother and the show's original iron-willed matriarch, screaming in horror before her own throat was slit. The massacre was total. Robb's entire army, gone. Legacy, wiped out. Fans didn't just cry, they howled. Social media exploded with disbelief. Reaction videos of viewers screaming, crying, or just sitting in stunned silence went viral. The betrayal felt personal, like we had just lost family. And that was the point. The show didn't offer any final words, no slow-motion goodbye, not even a heroic last stand. Just horror, just silence, like a punch in the gut, and then another. Producers David Benioff and D.B. Weiss explained that this moment was why they even took on the show in the first place. In an interview, they said the lack of a death speech or any closure made the scene more real and shocking. "You're deprived of even that satisfaction," Benioff said. "It's just like a kidney punch." And yeah, they nailed that feeling. George R.R. Martin, the author who dreamed up this soul crusher, said he based it on real-life betrayals from Scottish history, like the Black Dinner. He admitted that while he made up a lot, history had already done the heavy lifting when it came to savage plot twists. Richard Madden, who played Robb Stark, insisted they not change a thing, even though it meant killing off his own character. He believed the total wipeout of Robb, Talisa, and their unborn child was necessary to make the tragedy complete. "There's something more tragic about having it all be cut short," he said. And fans? We were left shattered. Because Robb wasn't just a character, he was hope. He was justice. He was the good guy in a cruel world, and watching him die like that felt like losing a friend. 13 years after it was written, the Red Wedding still stands as one of the darkest, most unforgettable deaths in television history. And man, what a shame it had to end that way. January 16, 2009. A routine television broadcast was about to take an unexpected, heartbreaking turn, one that would leave viewers frozen in disbelief. Israeli journalist Shlomi Eldar was preparing for a standard political interview with Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni. It was supposed to be another segment about the war in Gaza, another discussion about military operations and diplomatic tensions. But then, his phone rang. It was Dr. Izzeldin Abuelaish, a Palestinian doctor known for his unwavering commitment to peace. He had spent years working in Israeli hospitals, healing patients regardless of nationality, believing that medicine could bridge even the deepest divides. But this time, his voice was different. It was shaking, frantic, filled with terror. Then came the words that stopped everything. His home in Gaza had just been hit by an airstrike. His daughters were inside, 3 of them, Besson, Meyer, Aya, along with his niece, all dead. A stunned silence filled the studio. This was no longer about politics or war strategies. This was a father, live on air, breaking apart in real time. Eldar, barely able to process what he was hearing, made a split-second decision. He put the call on speaker. Suddenly, the entire nation was pulled into the moment. Viewers could hear Dr. Abuelaish's raw, unfiltered agony, his voice cracking, his breath ragged, his words barely forming through the sobs. In the background, the screams of his surviving children pierced the airwaves, their terror and grief spilling into every home that was watching. It was no longer a news report, it was a nightmare, unfolding live. Through his sobs, Dr. Abuelaish begged for help. Some of his family members were still alive, but trapped. Medical aid couldn't reach them. Roads were blocked. Every second meant life or death. He pleaded, desperate, his voice filled with a pain no parent should ever have to endure. Eldar, visibly shaken, turned to the cameras and urged the Israeli Defense Forces to act. This wasn't about governments or borders anymore. This was about saving innocent lives. The moment sent shockwaves through Israel. For many, it was the first time they saw the war not as numbers on a screen, but as real people, real families, being torn apart. The line between us and them blurred in an instant. Suddenly, no one could look away. Dr. Abuelaish's daughters were more than just casualties of war. Besson had been studying business, passionate about making a difference. Mayar dreamed of following in her father's footsteps, becoming a doctor to save lives. Aya, the youngest, loved poetry and had a future full of possibilities ahead of her. In one instant, all of it was gone. But even in his grief, Dr. Abuelaish refused to give in to hatred. Instead of revenge, he chose peace. He wrote a memoir, I Shall Not Hate, a Gaza doctor's journey on the road to peace and human dignity. He traveled the world, speaking about the need for coexistence, for humanity beyond politics. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 5 times, and yet the pain never left him. That night, his cries on live television became one of the most haunting moments in history, a moment that shattered the illusion of war as a distant conflict, a moment that made the world listen. It was more than a tragedy, it was a wake-up call, and though it couldn't bring his daughters back, it forced people to see what war truly costs, not in numbers, not in headlines, but in human lives that are lost forever.